Can I call the meeting to order? It's 6:01 p.m. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to humbly acknowledge that the land in which you live, learn, work, and play is Treaty 8 territory, traditional lands of the Cree and Dene, and unceded territory of the Métis. If anyone in attendance this evening wishes to address council on any agenda items, please register now with the Legislative Services Desk located to my right, and we'll be calling upon those once your item comes up when you're registered to speak. Before we adopt this evening's agenda, quick reminder that immediately following conclusion of the meeting, council will move directly into its annual organizational meeting. Now, is there anyone that wishes to serve a notice of motion? Councillor Weigel.
Thank you, Mayor. I, Councillor Stu Weigel, serve notice of my intent to bring forward the following motions for Council's consideration at the first meeting in November 2022. Whereas the municipality's rural water and sewer servicing program is open for residents in some rural communities to connect, and some residents have now connected to the municipality's piped water and sewer services, and whereas some residents have seen an increase in their water and wastewater utility billing since the time of connection, and whereas water and wastewater utility billing rates should be reviewed for all rural areas to ensure fairness and consistency, be it resolved that administration conduct an analysis of water and wastewater utility billings in the rural areas and bring forward this information during the discussion on the users' fees, rates, charges for 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Weigel. Are there any other motions? Councillor Stroud? Okay, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, Councillor Ken Ball, serve notice of my intent to bring forward the following motion for Council's consideration at the first meeting November 22. That administration review and bring forward recommendations to amend the fiscal responsibility policy FIN 160 to ensure that appropriate capital budget amendments are brought forward for council approval.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Are there any other motions? Councillor Cardinal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The notice of a motion. I, Councillor Kendra Cardinal, serve notice of my intent to bring forward the following motion for council consideration at the first council meeting in November 2022. Motion reads that administration be directed to undertake a third-party review of the elected officials' compensation, travel, and expense policy, LEG-050, and bring forward proposed changes to the policy as well as remuneration recommendations for the 2025 council in Q3 of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cardinal. Are there any more notices of motion? Thank you, Councillor Cardinal. And also, Councillor McGrath sends his regrets this evening. And if there's no objections, can we move that his motion item 5.1 move to the next meeting? Councillor Cardinal?
I approve.
Oh, thank you. There's no objections? Can I have someone make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Councillor Benjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the agenda be adopted as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have someone second that motion? Councillor Stroud?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. I second the motion.
Are there any other amendments to the agenda? I'm hearing none, so I'll call for a vote. All in favor? And seeing none opposed, that is carried unanimously. Moving on to consent agenda, does anyone wish to remove any items from the consent agenda? I'm hearing none, so I can have someone make that motion. Councillor Stroud?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. I move that the recommendations contained in items 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 be approved.
Thank you. Have someone second that motion. Councillor Benjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the motion.
And I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Seeing none opposed, that's carried unanimously. Next, we have the report in the 2022 External Service Plan. Delotte LLP, Lignified. Lignified Lori Farquharson, Chief Financial Officer, and Andrew Gurry, Delotte LLP, to introduce the report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Lori Farquharson, Chief Financial Officer. And with me this evening is Andrew Geary and Dave Hodges from Deloitte, who will be presenting our audit plan. The MGA requires that every Alberta municipality prepare and submit a financial information return and audited financial statements by May 1st of each year for the preceding year. The audit process begins with the audit plan, which details the scope and the time frame for the planned audit. The review of the audit service plan will provide the opportunity for members of council to understand the scope and timeline for the audit. I'll now ask Andrew to speak on our behalf.
Good evening, Your Worship, fellow council members. My name's Andrew Geary. I am a partner in the audit practice at Deloitte. My face will be unfamiliar to most of you, other than perhaps Councillor Stroud, and I would have said Councillor McGrath, but he's not here. So, by way of background, I took over as the partner in charge of the audit in 2018. And then last year had a medical leave coinciding with the audit cycle. So my colleague David Hodges stepped in and ran the audit in my absence. So you may remember David presenting the audit findings in April of this year. I am back, thankfully, and healthy again, and excited to come back in and take over as the audit partner again. So looking forward to working with Laurie, who I'm also meeting for the well, not for the first time tonight, but and so happy to be back. So the goal tonight is to present our audit plan. I will go through it and pull out the key points that we are required to communicate to yourselves as those charged with governance for the organization, and obviously happy to take any questions on that plan as presented. So if we turn to page 1 of our audit plan, which you should all have, the scope of the audit is the consolidated financial statements of the municipality. It will be for the year ended December 31, 2022. Those statements are prepared in accordance with public sector accounting standards and are prepared by administration, and we will then carry out our audit procedures to enable us to give an opinion on those statements, that those statements present fairly the financial position of the municipality. So in terms of the audit approach and the key things that to communicate to you, the two key parts that determine our audit approach are the identification of what are considered the significant risks for the audit, and then materiality, which governs which balances we would look at and the level of detail of the testing on those balances. So in terms of the significant risks, there are 5 identified for this year's audit. Those would be the risk of fraud relating to revenue recognition. That is required under the auditing standards to be a significant risk. So every audit we would do has to identify that as a significant risk. And to clarify that the relevance of significant risks those are the areas where we would spend the most detailed focus in our audit testing. It doesn't mean that's the only things we look at, but these are the key ones where we focus our testing. The second one is management override of controls. So again, required to be a significant risk when you're doing an audit, and recognizes management's unique position as the operator of those controls. And I'll go through, I can touch briefly on what our procedures are to deliver on those risks. The third is around tangible capital assets and the existence, completeness, and classification of those. The fourth is a derivative of the first one. So one of the key areas where revenue recognition may be affected is around the requirement to defer certain revenues, specifically provincial or federal funding, so that the recognition of the revenue matches the expenditure. And finally, the completeness and cutoff around accounts payable, accruals, and other liabilities. So if we turn to page 3 for 5, and 6. I'm not going to go into detail, but I'll touch very briefly. Those pages detail the specific procedures we'll carry out. Around underlying most of those, a specific focus on journal entries, especially related to the management override of control and the risk of fraud and revenue recognition, as that is the most common area where items might be identified in terms of manual journal entries that are posted. So we do spend a significant amount of time looking at manual journal entries. The other ones, the testing's laid out. That's the one I specifically wanted to pull out. So turning back to page 1, on the right-hand side is our materiality levels. So our materiality calculation preliminary, based on where we expect things to come out for the year, is 25.6 million. That is currently consistent with last year. Once the expenditures for the year are finalized, we will revisit that to make sure it remains appropriate. Having said that, there is a second threshold of 1.28 million, and so that is anything we find over and above 1.28 million, we would communicate to yourselves. Should we find a misstatement above that, we would communicate that to you. That's not to say we don't look at anything that isn't less than 25.6 million, but that is then used in the calculations to determine how many items we will look at related to each balance. So turning to page 2, while the audit is not designed to identify any and all fraud, we recognize that fraud risk is inherent in an organization, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to develop procedures that will reasonably identify material fraud or error that will materially affect the financial statements. We've set out the procedures we'll follow to go through to make sure that our audit is designed appropriately. The bottom of page 2, so requirement to identify any service organization, so where records are kept out with the municipality that feed into the financial statements. All of those are the investment brokers who manage the investment portfolio for the municipality. So we do rely on the statements they provide for the completeness and accuracy of the investment portfolios. And then in terms of the audit approach, the one last thing to cover is page 8. So the municipality is considered a group audit. There are a number of entities that are consolidated together. As such, there's a requirement to calculate a materiality for each of those components. So we will do more work on each component based on that lower materiality. We also provide audit opinions on the financial statements of all of those entities as well. So generally the number there will be the number we would use when we do the audit of those individual financial statements. And that was it in terms of the audit plan. The only other thing I wanted to touch on, just to draw to your attention, is Appendix 3, beginning on page 12. So that lists all of the upcoming changes to those public sector accounting standards. None of them will impact the current year. Next year, 2023, is the big year for those standards coming in and needing to be addressed, and there will be some changes to the financial statements as a result of those. In the appendix to identify that they are coming, they will not affect this year's audit. Having said that, to the extent that it makes sense and it's efficient, and as management, administration, my apologies, pulls together their positions and starts to put together the numbers for those changes, we will obviously look at those as and when it makes sense, even if that means it's during part of this audit. And that was all I wanted to cover, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, and it's a lot to take in, but it's good. Do we have any questions from council? Councillor Stroud?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman, and thank you for the presentation. Pleased to see the audit timeline, which includes issuance of 2022 management recommendation letter and the date for the auditors to meet with council set up for April 23rd, 2023. This is to the CFO. When do we review the appointment of the auditors for the RMWB?
Through the chair, if I can step in. So the last the audit went out for proposal for the 2017 year.
Okay.
We were the successful proponents. We entered into a contract that covered a 5-year audit cycle. So this would be the final year of that 5-year cycle. The municipality administration, there's an option to extend for twice for 1 year at the discretion of the municipality. We haven't had those conversations given the change in administration. That's something that we will need to address. But as of right now, this would be the final year of that 5-year contract.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stroud. Councillor Dogar? Councillor Dogar, you hit your mic again, you just shut it off. There you go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the presentation. I may know since how long you are on this chair, so that I frame my question accordingly.
Through the chair. So I have been the audit partner for the 2017, 18, 19, and 20 audits. So I think I've got that wrong then. It may be 18, 19, 20, 21.
Okay, so, you know, I got the idea.
18, 19, 20, 21, or 20.
Fine. You know, auditors and the inspections are done to prevent frauds, pilferages, wastage, and better governance. There was a big hue and cry from the council side in 2013. Lance Bouzier was in that council, Jane Stroud was, Keith McGrath was there. So what was the preventive action taken? Why I ask you this question is that after every inspection, there should be some remedial actions, corrections, or ultimate punishments for the big wrongs. Have we punished anybody so far or not? Maybe it was before you, but maybe if you can't reply today, next time.
So through the chair, so 2013 to confirm?
13 council which was elected. Guy Butler was also there, Councillor Bouzier was there, Councillor Jane Strout was also there.
I was not
yes.
involved. I do not have any knowledge of what happened.
Next time you can give me the reply.
I suspect, with due respect,
Sir,
and through the chair, I think that may be a question directed to administration.
Yeah, I think that was a different external audit that happened back then. This might have nothing to do with this audit, Councillor Dogar.
So. Sir, I agree with you, but you know, we should have some precedents in our mind that people were punished, and so that is a lesson for next people that they should be on their toes. That is my intention.
Yeah, I think if everyone does their job right, won't have to be punished. But you're correct. I'm not an auditor, but
through the chair, our role would be if we identify anything, we bring it to the attention of administration and to yourselves. Any action over and above that would be the responsibility of the municipality and yourselves as council. We wouldn't be involved in assessing punishments.
Fine.
That would be outside of our jurisdiction as auditors. So. But anything we identify is brought to administration and to yourselves.
Anything else, Councillor Dogar?
No, sir, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Benjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I just need some clarification about preliminary materiality and just a little bit of what you mean by that and how that is determined. Is it governed by general audit principles, or did RMWB set that standard? One. What happens to the figures between, the spends between 25 million and 1.28? And then what happens to the values that are lower? So the lower spends and then the in-between, and how we arrived at that. And so there's a process to also review those and to report back to council.
Through the chair. So materiality, the auditing standards, which are the rules we follow in conducting the audit, set out the process by which we would calculate materiality. Specifically for us, it is a percentage of the expenses of the municipality. We use a percentage. The one that we've used is consistent with Deloitte's approach across all of our government and municipal provincial work. So we do follow that. The concept of materiality is if we were to find an error or a number of errors that add up together and they were greater than that 25.6 million, we would not be able to issue our audit opinion. We would not be able to say the statements were true and fair. And so obviously that can't be zero, because we'd still be auditing the municipality 10 years from now to try and get that level of accuracy. So that's the audit standards that they consider that's a reasonable number. Okay. And so that would be the number. So if we find errors that total more than 25.6 million, we'd be unable to issue the audit opinion unless administration corrects those errors. Okay. Now, even if we found something like that and administration correct it, we would still report to you that we'd found those errors, but they had been corrected, and we'd be able to issue the audit report. Again, the auditing standards require we set a lower level for actually tracking and accumulating errors. Otherwise, again, it would take too long. We wouldn't be able to meet the May 1 deadline to finish the audit. That number is the 1.28 million. So anything individually above that 1.28 million, we report to you. If we find something under that 1.28 million, we do not report it and we will not track it. But we have to cut the line somewhere. That's where we cut the line.
Okay. So but is that reported maybe to the CFO, or what happens to them? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we would. I mean, there'd be some judgment we would play if we felt it was something that could result in an ongoing error or an error that may increase in future years. We'd raise it as maybe as a process or control improvement, but we wouldn't report it as an error.
Okay.
So
thank you. And then my final question, I think, is to CAO, acting CAO. I don't know if we currently have internal audits processed because of the kind of question that I asked earlier on. Do we have internal auditors? Is that still in process that we have in RMWB?
Through the chair to Councillor Benjoko, we do have an internal audit position. That position has been vacant due to a maternity leave, but we are in the position of staffing that. So we will be coming forward to council with an internal audit plan. I need to fill the position first and then look at timelines, but hopefully in the very early new year, we will have an internal audit plan to present.
Okay, thank you, because I have heard that is in the community, that's something people are looking to see that we have. Thank Thank you. And that's it for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Bajoko. Councilor Bussier?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bowman. Through the chair to the presenters, just an extension to Funky's question. Do you have organizations or municipalities that challenge you on those numbers? Like, for a layman, those numbers look large to me.
Yeah, through the chair, it's often an area of discussion. I've never changed my materiality as a result of those discussions. It is usually a case of understanding where the number comes from and the concept of materiality. But I have certainly had those discussions before. But those are we are absolutely consistent with the audit approach, not just within the public sector, but across all of our audits. So the numbers look large, but it's a large financial statement. If you look at those balances, there's not much that gets scoped out because of the materiality. And as I said, remember, it's not that we're not going to look at everything under that amount. But at the point where you start to do detailed testing, there's a mathematical formula in the computer somewhere that determines the number of samples you're going to look at. One of the key inputs into that is the materiality number. And so it drives as much that as just it's not a bright line of this, we're going to look at everything over this and nothing under that. And certainly at the transactional level, once we've selected a balance to test, we do the calculation. It says we test 50 transactions within that balance. None of those transactions are going to be at anywhere near the 25 million level. So if that gives you some comfort, we are looking at a lot of transactions as part of the audit, which would be significantly under those numbers. But it really is that ultimately that's the number. If we find errors over that, we would say that would be the level at which the users may be affected, and the decisions they make based on the statements may be affected if they were that far out. And that's the line where we say we can't say they're fair because they're out by that much.
So through the chair, so is it safe to assume that the numbers would be consistent in a community like St. Albert and Grand Prairie? Or is it, I know you mentioned something about it's based on expenses, but maybe not the overall budget numbers? Like, we have a fairly large budget for a community of our size, right?
Yeah, so they'd be consistent in terms of percentage of total expenses. So were we to, for your example, if we were auditing the city of St. Albert, the calculation would be the same as we would use the same percentage of their total expenses. So their number would be smaller, I assume. Yeah. But it would be consistent on the percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bussier. Councilor Cardinal?
Thanks, Linda. And Andrew, I missed the other guy's name. Oh, sorry, through the chair to presenters, Linda and Andrew. And
David.
David, thank you for your presentation. I guess it's just for information. I was just wondering, when you do the audit, do we do the audit in this public forum, or are we doing it in closed doors?
So through the chair, there is an in-camera session with council where we would discuss detailed findings from the audit, but there is also a presentation of the final audit findings in the public forum at council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cardinal. Councilor Dogar?
Thank you, sir. Another question. Audit and inspections are very important for better governance. Normally, audits are done, I think, regularly, maybe annually for every department, which is what I assume, and that should be done. And extreme cases where there is a suspected to be something extraordinarily wrong, some external auditors are also called, which is quite expensive. So why I'm making these statements, please correct me if I'm wrong. And once the external people get hold of the situation and they spot something, is the internal people accountable for something why that omission was due to some oversight left from them? Sir, did you understand my question? Thank you very much.
And through the chair. So the audit, the purpose of the audit is to provide an opinion on the financial statements. So if something does not affect the financial statements, this audit does not look at it. The goal of the audit is to give the opinion on the financial statements. We use the materiality to determine the work we will do. We go do the work. So we will not, there are certain areas within the municipality that we will not look at as a matter of course during the audit. In the areas we do look at, if we find anything, we will raise those with administration and with council. To the extent that in determining the procedures that we are going to do in the areas we're going to look at, yes, materiality will govern that. We also do a risk assessment process. So we would meet with administration to understand plans during the year, changes during the year, events during the year. We will talk to, we will review council minutes. We will we'll do a number of procedures to make our risk assessment to determine where we think the risk of errors in the financial statements are, and we'll make sure that that's covered in our work. Part of that does involve asking, is anyone aware of fraud? Is there any suspicions of fraud? Is there anything that we should be aware of? And to the extent that the answer to that is yes or maybe, then we would incorporate that into that risk assessment and we plan our procedures accordingly. Again, in terms of what happens after something is found, that rests with administration and council. We would simply be in a position to provide the information we found. Does that answer your question?
To quite some extent.
Do you have another question, Councillor Dogar?
No, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Grandison?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair. In my brain, this is more just like for a comfort set in terms of council understanding, because I've been through quite a number of these audits. And I think just listening to some of the questions, I'd like to get some clarity and get you to clarify. When you find something, even if something's going well, but you suspect through process that there is an opportunity for failure, you always identify those as well, correct?
So through the chair, yeah, part of the deliverable of the audit is what we call the management letter. So anything, wherever there's an error, we would find the root cause for the error and include that and what we think would need to be fixed to make sure that error doesn't reoccur. We do also, to the best of our ability, if we see a process that could be improved, from experience of looking at other organizations or whatever, we would bring that forward in the management letter as well.
Thank you. And that was kind of the point I was looking at. Is it's been my experience that even when things are operating, if there is an identified perception of error or failure, usually the audit will identify those and pass that back on to administration. So I just wanted to get clarity on that because I've seen that happen quite a number of times where it's like, here's a process that's working. However, here's where an error can occur and a problem can occur. And I've seen that happen quite frequently as well. So, and I guess, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Grandison. Do we have any other questions from council? I'm not seeing any. Do we have any other delegates to this item? And can I have someone make the motion? Councillor Grandison?
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the 2022 External Audit Service Plan as provided by the external auditors, Deloitte LLP, be approved.
Now, someone second that motion. Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. I second the motion.
Are there any other further questions of council administration? I'm not seeing any, so I'll call for a vote. All in favor? And seeing none opposed, that's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And the next business item, tax relief request plan 1222967, Block 1, Lot 1. I'd like to invite Kevin Navindi, Manager Assessment, to introduce the report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kevin Navidi will be providing an overview on administration's recommendations on the tax relief request for Plan 1222967, Block 1, Lot 1.
On July 25, 2022, administration received a tax refund request for a portion of the 2019 taxes in the amount of $109,343.57 for the property with the plan number 1222967, Block 1, Lot 1. The request is related to an error of the assessed value from the 2019 tax year. The land was valued at full market value, where a portion of it was not developable and required a downward adjustment. The council report notes that the owner initially contacted the assessment branch in November 2019. However, the owner just confirmed that the initial contact was in August 2020. Therefore, the property was unfairly assessed in 2019 and 2020. The property owner was not aware that they can request tax relief under Section 347 of the Act until they contacted taxation branch in 2022. Property tax relief policy Section 326 authorizes administration to refund taxes applied during the current year or past 2 years without presenting to council if it's determined that the assessment and taxation branch has made an error in the administration of the account. Therefore, administration issued a refund for the 2020 taxes. However, the 2019 taxes cannot be adjusted by the administration as it falls outside of the 2-year timeline. Subsection 3471 of the Municipal Government Acts authorizes the council, where it deems it equitable, to refund all or part of a tax. Due to an internal municipal error, the property owner paid higher taxes. Administration recommends that a tax refund be allowed for a portion of 2019 taxes in the amount of $109,343.57. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie and Kevin. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Grandison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair. Just from a language clarity, because as this reads as tax relief, but as I've heard you describe, it's actually a tax refund because of an error and an overcharge. So I just want to get clarity, because we've certainly dealt with a conversation around relief versus refund, and I see them as two very different things.
To the chair, to Councillor Grandson, that's correct. This is a tax refund request.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grandison. Councillor Vinjoko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Grandison, because that's one of the points I have here. So the picture wasn't quite clear, but that clarifies some of the questions, that this is not a forgiving, you are not forgiving the taxes for refunding. So my question is, this is an overcharge. What was the original? And if, I mean, I don't know how this was missed by 100,000. I'm just wondering how much this tax account is worth, that it was missed and also absorbed by the citizen. That's one. Then, if going forward this has now been rectified, so that we won't come back to this, so I'm wondering how come, and then what happens going forward? Is that taken care of proactively going forward?
To Chair, to Councillor Wanjoko, the original assessment was 21 million. The revised assessment is $8 million. The original tax bill was $163,000. The new tax bill for 2019 will be $66,000, and there were about $12,000 penalties added to it. And overall, the difference is $96,000 for the property taxes plus $12,000 penalties is about $109,000 reduction. And going forward, the issue is the first was the mailing address. So the owner has the accurate mailing address that they're receiving the property notices, and they will be able to review the notices. The second measure that we are implementing in 2019 is percentage change. So anything values that like this increase from $8 million to $21 million, which is over 20% increase, will be reviewing by the staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Banjoko. Councilor Bussier.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bowman. Through the chair, one of my questions was already asked by Councilor Banjoko. The question that actually Councilor Ball had mentioned it to me is when you're reading the rationale for recommendation, the clause reads, or the sentence reads, the issue is brought to assessment branch was not adequately addressed. Consequently, the owner paid higher taxes. What wasn't adequately addressed? Like, why didn't we fix the problem instead of having the gentleman have to come here tonight?
To Chair, to Councillor Bussier, the issue was that assessment was the notice was mailed out in 2019, and the issue brought us in 2020. So we were not able to change the assessment back then, and the owner didn't request a tax relief back then. They didn't know they can ask for tax relief, so we could bring it up to the council. However, as soon as they called in 2022 that there is the issue and I want to go to council, we just brought the meeting, and the request was in July, and we are in council right away in October.
Okay, so we're not going to have this issue come forward next year, the year after. As far as we're concerned, it's resolved?
To the Chair, to Councillor Bussier, the issue has been resolved, yes.
Okay, and just more of a, I guess I'm just trying to find where it is here. It's more of a comment, but anyway, it just says budget financial implications. It says this will result in a net decrease. Really, we had the gentleman's money that we weren't entitled to. Like, I mean, to me, it doesn't, I recognize there's a decrease, but we had someone's money that we didn't really rightfully own or have the rights to.
To Chair, to Councillor Bussier, that's correct. The money was paid. However, this was budgeted money. So, for example, we already paid for the education portion. We already paid other requisitions, and therefore those gonna be there. We are not going to get those monies back from the province. Those are already paid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bussier. Councilor Cardinal.
I beat you. I guess I got a question for, through the chair, Dan Navidi. I guess with the mistake made by us, our municipal government, I guess, I wonder if any other repercussions came out of it for the actual person that's asking for the tax refund, because it's a big amount of money, and I was just wondering if, did it hurt the person, or did he have to pay any extra taxes on the money that was missing? You know what I'm saying? I just kind of wanted to maybe get a sense of that. If you can answer that. If not, well, that's fine. I just thought I'd
Sorry, to Chair to Councillor Cardinal, I didn't understand question very well. I apologize.
Well, $109,000 of somebody else's money, you know, if he had the money, you know, it would have been better for him, obviously, but I'm saying with him not having the money, did it affect his lifestyle or did it affect him, you know, personally is what I'm trying to say, right?
To Chair to Councillor Cardinal, that's correct, but we don't have any other, like, paying back any other refund or any incentives. And this is just it's like the errors in both sides. For example, why it was not contacted in 2019. If the assessment is wrong, why people didn't appeal to the assessment review board. They are like both sides, and right now the best we can do is just to for the equity refund the payment.
Through the chair, Navidi, thanks for that. I do understand, you know, people do make mistakes, even governments, and I'm glad we're going to be able to fix it. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Cardinal. Councillor Majoko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again for the presentation. And I think clearly what I also want to say is about compensation, or at least let's hold ourselves accountable, even if it's to issue an apology. Because if it's me, that's why I'm wondering, or any of us, to not have even 2,000 or 10,000 for that long. So I don't think it's his fault. So it's our fault. And good leadership, we should hold ourselves accountable and at least apologize for the error on our side. And if the gentleman is here, I think I can see him. So indeed, not to overbeat the point, but I think we are sorry that we did that. We had your money. Thank you.
To Chair to Councillor Banjako, I totally agree, and I already called and apologized personally to the taxpayer, and we had our staff doing inspections in the property and doing our best to not have such things repeated again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Majoko. Do we have any questions from council? I'm not seeing any. Do we have any other delegates for this item? Or, sorry, Councillor? Nope. Do we have any delegates for this item?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. We have no delegates for this item.
Thank you. Can I have someone make the motion? Councillor Weigel?
I move that the request for a tax refund in the amount of $109,343.57, comprising of property taxes and penalties for the property located at Plan 1222967, Block 1, Lot 1, be approved.
Thank you. Can I have someone second that motion? Councillor Grandison?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second that motion.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of council for administration? I'm not seeing any, so I'll call for a vote. All in favor? And I'm not seeing any opposed, so that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Kevin. Next, we have a report on review of water and sanitary utility rates differentials. I'd like to invite Antoine Remp, Director of Environmental Services, to introduce the report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Antoine Remp, and I am the Director of Environmental Services. Next to me are Laurie Farquharson, Chief Financial Officer, and Chris Davis, Senior Manager of Legal Services. Today, I am presenting information about water and sanitary rate differentials. On June 28, 2022, Council passed the following motion asking that administration reviews the water and sanitary utility rate differentials to determine if there are inequities in the current fee structure, and if differentials are found, to provide Council with options and recommendations on how to best address such utility rate differentials. While this motion seems pretty straightforward, it was a manual process that took the Finance Department a significant amount of hours to go through all the multi-unit residential buildings in the city and identify if a differential was indeed present. We also did some benchmarking to identify what bidding model other municipalities across the province are using. It turns out that the vast majority are using a model based on meter size for the fixed portion of the bill, along with a variable rate based on consumption. To simplify this presentation, I will refer to multi-unit residential buildings as multi-family buildings or units. To start, I'd like to break down the fee structures that the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo uses for multi-family accounts in the region. This fee structure is detailed in our fees, rates, and charges bylaw number 21-019. The cost of water for multifamily accounts is based on a fixed rate for water, which is based on the meter size. Then there is a variable rate charged based on the consumption identified by the meter, and finally a water apartment fee that is a flat rate per unit. The cost for wastewater also consists of a fixed wastewater charge based on the meter size, a variable amount based on consumption, and the wastewater apartment fee, which again is based on the number of units. All 6 charges are combined into one bi-monthly invoice sent to the owners of the account. Here again, in more details, based on Schedule N of Bylaw 21-019, the water charges are based on the meter size for the fixed rate, which is highlighted in yellow here, and the variable rate based on consumption, highlighted in green. Then at the bottom, you can see the apartment fee based on the number of apartments or units. One thing worth noting is that the water billing for multifamily buildings falls under the commercial category of the bylaw. As you can see, as the meter size increases, the fixed charge also increases, but in a gradual way. The billing for the wastewater portion is based on Schedule P of that same bylaw. Here again, we have the fixed rate in yellow based on the meter size, and the variable rate in green based on consumption, and the apartment fee at the bottom, which is based on the number of units. As opposed to the gradual increase on the water side, the sanitary or wastewater fixed rate jumps as you increase the meter size. This jump is partially responsible for the differential in rate based on meter size for some of the multifamily accounts in the region. I'll touch on that a bit more in the following slides. Administration plans on reviewing these cost increases in the fees, rates, and charges bylaws that will be presented in front of Council on November 22nd. As explained in the previous slide, the size of the meter matters, especially for the wastewater, as the cost jumps with the meter size going up. Many multifamily developments only have 1 meter, and for this development, the billing is pretty straightforward. On the other hand, some of the other developments have multiple meters or dual meters. In this situation, the billing structure is based on the bigger size meter. The first type of dual meter is called a compound meter. As you can see in the picture, it has 2 meters in one. This type of meter is often used for commercial applications and multifamily applications where the flow changes significantly through the day or the week. If we look at an apartment building, for example, the flow at 2 in the morning from one resident flushing the toilet is minimal, while many residents in the building taking showers around the same time require a much bigger flow. This setup allows for that range by having the small meter measure the small flows and the large meter measuring the higher flows. These meters are great for apartment buildings and developments with many units and are usually not sized for fire protection flows or fire hydrants. Here's an illustration of a compound meter setup. You can see the municipal water line in the street, the check valve near the property line, and the system on private property. As mentioned in the previous slide, the compound meter has two different sizes of meter, and the big one is the one used for identifying the fixed rate for water and wastewater. Both meters measure flow, and the variable rate will include both consumptions. But the fixed fees are only based on the bigger size meter. You can see that the Fire Protection Services flow bypasses the meter, which aligns with the current engineering servicing standards. By allowing the Fire Protection Services flow to bypass the meters, these can be sized based on the demand of the residential units instead of the fire protection flow. The second type of dual meter, as illustrated here, is called the Fire Protectus meter. As the name describes, this meter is designed to handle fire protection flows. The minimum size water line required to supply a fire hydrant is 6 inches. So depending on the engineering servicing standards that were applicable at the time of construction, a multifamily development might not have been able to bypass that flow and therefore had to install the meter on that one line. This is what happened with the Lincoln Townhome development, for example. The smaller meter that you can see in the picture is the one that monitors consumption. The bigger meter will not be activated unless a fire or a fire hydrant is opened to flush the line or test the hydrant. So basically, unless there is a demand for fire protection services flow, the bigger meter will not let any water pass through it, redirecting the water to the smaller meter. And if you open a fire hydrant on the property and the demand on the system increases, the bigger meter would open, let the water through, and monitor the consumption. There is an impact on the multifamily building that has one of these meters installed because of the current fee structure. The bigger meter is used for billing purposes, and the cost of water and wastewater, therefore, is higher compared to a similar development that might have a compound meter installed. Here's an illustration of the Fire Protectus meter setup. Again, you can see the municipal water line in the street, the check valve near the property line, and the system on private property. As mentioned in the previous slide, the Fire Protectus meter has two different sizes of meter, with the big one designed to accommodate fire protection services. That bigger meter isn't used unless a fire or a fire hydrant is open for testing or flushing. But the current fee structure is based on the fixed rate for water and wastewater on the bigger meter. Also, both meters measure flow, and even if the bigger meter rarely sees any flow, the variable rate would include both consumptions. The Lincoln Townhome development is an example of a multifamily development with a Fire Protectus meter. Back in 2012, when the development was built, the engineering servicing standard didn't allow fire protection service bypass. This means that only one line was allowed per development, meaning that the meter had to be sized to accommodate the flow of fire protection services. For that reason, this development installed a Fire Protectus meter combining 6-inch and 1.5-inch meter sizes, and based on the bidding structure, has been charged for the water and wastewater based on the 6-inch meter size, even if the consumption of that meter is very low or absent. It is important to remember that this setup was based on the engineering servicing standards at the time. And while the engineering servicing standards have been updated since then, this development, along with 16 others, is charged based on the bigger size required at the time of construction. Administration has looked at how all multifamily buildings are being built, which represents about 10,027 units, and has drafted two options for your consideration. These two options are summarized here, and I will expand on each one in upcoming slides. Option 1 consists of looking at all multifamily buildings with fire protectors meter of sizes 4 inches and more, and changing the billing structure for these units based on the lower sized meter. The second option consists of replacing the 4 fixed rates, which are the water, wastewater, and both apartment fees, with 1 flat rate per unit for all multifamily accounts. Let's look at option 1. As you can see in this scenario, any development with a fire protectors meter of size 4 inches and above would now be charged the fixed rate for water and wastewater based on the lower size meter. Why 4 inches? As I mentioned in the previous slides, any development with fire hydrants would require at least a 6-inch water line, so anything 6 inches or more would be considered fire protection services. Analyzing the consumption of these bigger size meters confirms that there is no flow or very random and significant flow which could be attributed to a fire hydrant flushing exercise with these developments that have the fire protectors meter of 6 inches or more. So why have we decided to include the 4-inch size meter? Because some buildings might have pipe hookups on the outside walls for a fire truck to connect in case of fire. While not as ideal as a 6-inch line, the 4-inch hookup can be used by a fire truck to tie into with a special adapter. There is only a couple of developments that have the protectors 4-inch setup, so we decided to include them in this option. The consumption also confirms that their flow is very sporadic, if present at all. So again, the new billing structure could be based on the lower size meter for any multifamily building with a fire protectors of 4 inches or more. Administration has identified 17 accounts representing 1,526 units that would be impacted by the change. All 17 accounts would see a reduction in their water and wastewater billing, but that reduction would vary depending on the size of meters that were originally installed. If we continue to look at our Lincoln Townhome example, under this recommended option, their bi-monthly cost per unit would drop from $256 every 2 months to $39 every 2 months. The regional municipality would see a revenue decrease of approximately $370,000 per year, which would be attributed to the reduction of fixed rates for water and wastewater. The variable consumption would remain the same, and so would the apartment fee. It is manageable in terms of workload for the municipality to implement this change. Despite having to enter the change manually because of the age of the software, there would only be 17 accounts to enter. After these are updated, the future bills will be generated automatically again. The second option that administration considered was to use a flat fee per unit per month. This would remove all considerations for meter sizes. The only factors that would impact the fixed fees and apartment fees for both water and wastewater would be the number of units in the development. For example, a development with 18 units would pay 18 times the rate prescribed by the fee rates bylaw. A development with 400 units would pay 400 times the flat fee. Depending on the selected flat fee number, the cost impact on the development boards would be either positive, which means a cost savings, or negative, which means a cost increase. The revenue impact would also depend on the flat fee selected, with a potential increase or decrease for the municipality. For example, if we were to pick a flat fee per unit at $38 per month, approximately 5,000 units would see a cost savings, and approximately 5,000 would see a cost increase. Some of these decreases or increases might be quite insignificant, but others could be more substantial. The revenue impact to the RMWB with a flat fee of $38 per month per unit would be a decrease of nearly $500,000 a year. If we increase that flat fee per unit to $48 per month per unit, approximately 6,500 units would see a cost increase, while about 3,600 units would see a cost reduction. The impact on the RMWB would be an increase in revenue of about $120,000 per year. While this option could appear to be the most equitable and fair, the number of accounts to be updated would be significant for our billing software. Every single one of the 279 multifamily accounts would require an update to their current billing structure with the removal of the 2 water and wastewater fixed rates and apartment rates to be replaced with the 1 flat fee. This option is the most labor-intensive and would impact the most residents. Finally, based on the completed benchmarking, only a few municipalities are using the flat fee per unit, as the vast majority continues to use a meter size in their billing structure. For all of these reasons, administration would like to recommend option 1 as the most cost-efficient solution to the current rate differential. We recommend that we take any multifamily development with a fire protectors meter of 4 inches or more and change the billing structure of these units to be based on the lower size meter. We also recommend that this change be implemented on April 1st, 2023, when other changes to the fee rates and charges bylaw 21-019 are implemented. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Antoine. Do we have any questions from council? Councillor Cardinal.
Through the chair, thanks, Antoine, for your presentation. I guess my question is rurally with the meters and you know the pressure that goes to the houses. Are they the same pressurized system that's used in Fort McMurray?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair to Councillor Cardinal. Just to make sure I understood the question correctly, you're asking if the rural meters are the same as the one we would have in urban?
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the structure that is being metered, like as I demonstrated in my presentation, we have 2 different types of meters, whereas there's 2 meters. So in the rural communities where we have meters, because a portion of the rural communities don't have meters.
Yeah.
So the ones who have meters are the same type of meters that would be installed in the residential units in Fort McMurray. So the residential units and some of the development have only 1 meter, and this would be the same type of meters that would be connected to our system that is called Neptune, and that's how we can monitor the consumption.
Thanks. I guess my next question would be, for the people that don't have meters, how are they monitored, as well as what monetary do they get billed?
Through the chair to Councillor Cardinal. This is a great question. Maybe a question for another day, but we do have some inconsistencies with some communities, and part of the reason why some communities don't have meters, and if we look at Fort Chipewyan, for example, because the network, the underground infrastructure, the water lines cannot be buried as deep because of the bedrock. So what this means, it's a higher risk of freezing, so we have to have bleeders on them, and we have a continuous flow flowing through them to prevent freezing. So it's difficult to add meters to those houses because, again, we would have to charge them for water, a much bigger consumption than what we would be for residents in Fort McMurray who don't have to have the water running all winter.
So
it's a fixed rate. For Fort Chipewyan, we're currently charging a fixed rate for water, a fixed rate for wastewater.
Which is?
Yeah, I think, Councillor Cardinal, I think we want to remain on the topic of what the motion is, or what the subject is water and sanitary utility rate differentials when it comes to the subject that matter. And right now we're not discussing between rural and urban water consumption. It's just these meters that are in question.
Okay, so back to the meter then. So when you're using when the meters in Fort Chipewyan and rural communities, and then the meters in the city, is the pressure the same, or is it not? Like I understand you're saying that there's bleeding through, right? Or am I off topic again here?
Yeah, I think you're still off topic, Councilor. We have,
okay.
It's the...
That's fine.
It's the
that's okay. I'm
multifamily
okay with that.
dwellings we're dealing
I'm just
with,
curious.
That
right?
is
because
a great question, but I think you probably, we can get administration
I'll leave
to
that
answer
for an email then. How about that? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I think we can do that. Councilor Benjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm almost reluctant so that I'm not off topic. So I wanted to know if the 17 units or the dwellings that are identified are only within Fort McMurray region, or is spread all over RMWB?
Through the chair to Councillor Benjoko, I think that one works. The question is good. So we have looked at multi-units residential. So there are some in rural, like in Anzac, for example, but it's more like apartment building, condos, and townhomes. So we do have some of these in the rural, but not many. And these ones are addressed by the same bylaw.
Okay. Okay. And then if we take the option that you are recommending, you are not saying we should go by, but it's recommended, it will be flat fees. Or it will be the individualized billing of the units, and we will be losing a revenue of $370,000, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Benjoko, no and yes. So the first question, it's not the flat fee. It would be, we're going to look at those 17 accounts that have been identified with a type of meter, which is called fire protectus meter. So those 17 accounts would be, instead of looking at the bigger size meter, we're going to consider the smaller size meter. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going to generate a revenue decrease for the municipality of $370,000. The flat fee is, the second option is the one that we do not recommend.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Benjoko. Councilor Stroud?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman, and thank you for the presentation. Antoine, when I looked at this commercial meter size charge, is that the same rate or fee for commercial businesses and multi-dwelling buildings?
Through the chair to Councillor Stroud, thank you for the question. So are you talking about the water charge or the wastewater charge?
I'm just looking at the water charge.
Okay. For the water charge, it is the same commercial fee, the commercial billing. The only difference between a commercial account and a multi-family or multi-residential units would be the apartment fees that is added to it.
Okay, so commercial business
would pay the same, correct.
And on the fixed, is it different? Or is it the same also?
Through the chair to Councillor Stroud, it is the same. It's based on the size of meter, regardless if it's a business or if it's a multi-family residential.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stroud. Councillor Bussier?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bowman. Through the chair to Antoine. Just more of a comment. I just want to thank you and Lori and Chris for your hard work on this. My understanding is Councillor Murphy tried to bring it forward last term, and for whatever there was resistance, so I do appreciate it. I know it probably was long and hard work, so thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bussier. Do you have any other questions from council? I'm not seeing any. Do we have any other delegates for this item? Sorry, Councillor Benjoko, you... No? Do you have any delegates for this? Do you have any delegates for this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have no delegates for this item.
Thank you. Can I have someone make the motion? Councillor Grandison?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the billing of multi-dwelling buildings or communities having a fire protectus meter size 4 inches and above be charged based on the smaller size meter effective April 1st, 2023.
Thank you. Have someone second that motion? Councillor Banjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the motion.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions from council? Councillor Ball?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to do a friendly amendment to this. I don't know why we need to wait till April 1st, 2023 to change the billing. I'd like to change the reading to be, well, basically as soon as possible. I don't know why we would wait 6 months to change the billing.
Through the chair to Councillor Ball, one option is that we will be bringing forward the user fee and rates bylaw for approval on November 22nd. And based on consultation with our legal and within administration, we could make a recommendation that this new fee structure that we're setting up be effective immediately or on January 1st, which would give administration the time to do the internal paperwork and all the adjustments and notifications.
But right now we're saying it's effective April 1st. I'd like some reassurance that we're going to try and do it faster than April 1st, if that's the case.
Through the chair, if a motion was put forward, then we could make it effective with. Okay.
So, Councillor Ball, did you want to amend that?
I think the effective date should be January 1st at the latest.
Through the chair, we just need to make sure that we have it written within the bylaw and approved within the bylaw. So on November 22nd, we'll bring the bylaw forward for approval, and we will have that recommendation and the new fee structure within the schedule and have it with a January 1st effective date.
Fair enough.
Okay, so do we want to? Yeah, please.
Thank you. Through the chair to council members. The friendly amendment is to strike the effective date of April 1 and insert January 1 of 2023. And Mayor Bowman, my recommendation would be to ask if there's any objections to the friendly amendment. If there are no objections to the friendly amendment by council, then it could be accepted by unanimous consent.
Thank you. Are there any objections to that effective date being changed to January 1st, 2023? I'm not seeing any. So that is put in there, Councillor Ball. I need to reread the motion. Can I have, I believe it was Councillor Grandison. Can I get you to reread that motion, Councillor Grandison, with the new date in there, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I move that the billing of multi-dwelling buildings or communities having a fire protection meter size 4 inches and above be changed based on the smaller size meter effective January 1st, 2023.
And can I have someone second that motion? Councillor Banjoko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the motion.
Thank you. And is there any other questions from council and debate points? I'm not seeing any, so I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Not seeing any opposed. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And again, I'd like to thank Councillor Boussier for bringing this forward to our attention, and also like to thank administration and environmental services, as well as Lori and Chris for all your work and cutting the red tape and getting this done exponentially. Thank you. And again, as a reminder, we're referring item 5.1, Councillor McGrath's motion, to the next meeting when he's in attendance. As I'll now invite Councillor Cardinal to speak to his motion. Following that, we'll hear from delegates and then questions of council, followed by debate. You can go ahead, Councillor Cardinal.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess I just wanted to provide some insight to council as well as community members watching and people here. I'd requested to have September 30th be recognized from the mayor and council in the municipality as a statutory holiday for, you know, the residential school system, TRC, Orange Shirt Day, whatever it is that you want to call it. I understand that there's some holidays that are statutory holidays for our municipal staff. You know, that's New Year's, Alberta Family Day, Good Friday, Easter Monday, Victoria Day, Canada Day, Heritage Day, Labor Day, Thanksgiving Day, Remembrance Day, Boxing Day, and Christmas Day. The federal government had put it all forward for, you know, it to be a national holiday for the provinces that wanted to make it a national holiday, and it's not a statutory holiday. So, you know, Victoria Day, first of all, is a day for, you know, the Queen, and God rest her soul, a good day. You know, government imposed, and it's for I guess, you know, Queen Victoria. Not to do any offense on anybody and the national holiday or anything like that. I believe that you know, the government's significant what's the word that I'm looking for, input on, you know, the residential school system and the murdering and you know, the taking away of the people, our Native Canadian people. New Brunswick, along with Prince Edward Island, NWT, and Nunavut are the only 4 provinces in Canada that made September 30th a statutory holiday with pay. And as a municipal government, I really thought that we want to lead the way, and we don't need to have to follow federal nor provincial guidelines to make sure that we're leading the way and speaking on behalf of the Indigenous people that were lost, or should I say Native Canadian people. I would just like to say that, you know, I would want to have couples, families to be able to reflect and go home for that day and mourn the, you know, the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples that were murdered, taken away, and not only to mourn, but to also celebrate that we were not assimilated like the government planned. And that's why I brought this motion forward. A lot of work has been put in from, you know, Indigenous and rural relations, and not only them, the whole of our RMWB and the whole community of the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo. But that still doesn't make it a statutory holiday, and to where you can go home, sit and relax, and tell your loved ones that, you know what, we're sharing this day with the people that were taken away from their families. And that's the reason why I brought this forward. And I know that we have the ability here as mayor and council to be able to do that. We don't need the federal government nor the provincial government to pave the way for us. We are our own municipal government, and we're able to do that ourselves. So with that being said, I really hope that I have the support as well to be able to put this through and let our municipal employees be recognized, I guess, are, you know what I mean. So just thought I'd say that. So that's one of the reasons why I brought it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cardinal. Appreciate that. Just a reminder, Council, before we go to questions, that today we're not debating whether it should be a national holiday or not. We're going to be discussing whether administration be directed to research and bring forward a report for Council's consideration to recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th. Thank you. Councilor Grandison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair. All respect to my colleague, Councilor Cardinal. I, for one, am not in support of this, but I'd like to explain why. I think that our municipality has done a fantastic job in terms of, say, the last day in which our employees were encouraged.
Sorry, Councillor Grandison, right now we're just doing questions.
But how do I support
Okay.
not putting it forward if I don't have a reason for it? That's what I'm trying to understand. I heard what you said, so I can just go no.
No. Right now it's just questions, and then we'll go to debate after the questions, after the motion's forward, if that makes sense.
I'm just ahead of myself. That's what you're telling me.
Exactly.
I've done that more than once, Mr. Mayor. So I will bow out until such time as there's debate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No argument. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Councillor Cardinal? I'm not seeing any. Do we have any delegates to that item?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, we have no delegates registered for this item.
Thank you. Councillor Cardinal, would you read that motion put on the floor, please? Your mic.
I move that the administration be directed to research and bring forward a report for council's consideration of recognizing the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th, as a general holiday for municipal employees beginning in 2023. Such report to include any implications, operational, financial, or otherwise.
Can someone second that motion? Councillor Walkwin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second that motion.
Thank you. Now, are there any other opportunities? Now is an opportunity for council to ask questions and debate points. Councillor Grandison.
Oh my, now my timing's good. Thank you. More than once people have had to rein me in. In any event, I go back to my initial statement of respect for the position and the rationale that my councillor colleague has indicated. Having said that, I look at this motion in a number of different ways. One, I believe our municipality has 3 additional holidays over and above the required statutory holidays. This would add another one, and the cost imposed would be relatively steep. But even beyond that, on a more specific methodology of recognizing what's actually happening, it's been my experience, certainly when I worked in the workforce, that when I had a long weekend, I certainly never used it as a method, as a means of reflectiveness. I used it as a means of spending time with my family and going away on weekends and so on and so forth. I found that what we did with our employees on the day was offer an opportunity for our employees to participate in activities and educational opportunities within the community that were actually happening, which encouraged people, and I think even more so supports truth and reconciliation by creating an opportunity for people to learn that otherwise may not happen if people are simply given a day off. I think that when our corporation supports employees well being paid, well at work, to go and participate, learn, understand that that is actually the reason for the calls to action is so that we can all be educated and learn from our history, not make the same mistakes and move forward. My fear is that with a holiday, we would lessen that, not increase it. And for that reason, I don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grandison. Councillor Stroud?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman, and thank you, Councillor Cardinal, for bringing this motion forward. And you have followed a good process in asking that administration be directed to undertake a third-party review. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stroud. Councillor Benjoko?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman, and thank you, Councillor Cardinal, for bringing that forward. I believe it's time to bring this up, and for a third party to review and decide whether it's something that we can do. Certainly, there's cost to holidays, and I don't think we are debating tonight, but I can believe that there will be value in people, the indigenous and First people, to be able to have that time off to reflect and to spend time with family for healing. And for those of us who are still on the journey to learning, whether we are in the office or not, we must continue to learn and improve on the way we handle the effects of what had happened. I don't want to keep going back to that, but certainly mental fitness of affected families, for me, will be in question on days like that. If somebody's family has been taken or grandparents were in the residential schools and things like that, I don't think you can get good value for their work for that day. Mind to task, even safety. So I therefore support that at least we review. But whether it's going to be the entire workforce, I'm sure the consultants will be able to advise the path forward. Because what it is to Councillor Cardinal or Councillor Loretta would be slightly different from somebody like me who's reading it or watching it on the news. It's different. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bajoko. Councillor Dogar.
Thank you, sir, for giving me the chance. I appreciate the councillor for presenting. Amen. Listen to me. Sorry. I appreciate for presenting this motion, and it's a good idea to revive our history and all those which blunders were done in the past. But at the same time, I am also with councillor, my colleague and grandson, that it should not be a complete off day to that we forget and take easy things. So it should be somewhere in between. There should be holiday, but there should be a assembly of 1 hour in each department in which certain omissions which were done in the past that made people so grieved, that should be revived. And history should be, we should try to extract some lessons from the history. Also for the First Nation, our First Nations, and also anywhere happening in the world, some touch should be done. It should be a holiday, but not sleeping holiday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilgar. Good points. Councillor Walkman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support that. Thank you, Councillor Cardinal. September 30th, yes, it's a day of reconciliation, but I'm just looking out at the students here that are in the chairs here in chamber. I don't know if one of them, or maybe even all of them, if their parents work for the municipality or anywhere here. It's a day of learning and showing these kids, what took place before. It's sure to be a holiday, but you don't know if they're going to be sleeping or if they're going to be awake. It's for them to take that day to reflect of what took place. And if it's teaching their children, or if it's taking them out, or if it's even just a day to reflect, that's the time that we need here in this area because of the Indigenous that is in the surrounding communities. There's a lot that's going on here, and we need time to reflect on that day that actually became a Canadian reflection of the stuff that took place. I won't repeat it here, but I fully support, and I thank you, Councillor Cardinal, for bringing that forward.
Thank you, Councillor Walkman. Councillor Grandison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely, Councillor Walkman's correct. It's up to the individual. But I look at Remembrance Day, and I look at the participation on Remembrance Day, and I'll bet you it's less than 1% of the population. Less than 1%. And what a day to remember. And we're supposed to learn and remember on that day as well. What happens, though, is over time, these things get adopted into just a luxury rather than a learning. And when we create an environment for people to learn by creating the opportunity on that day for our employees, we actually create a methodology of learning that in my mind speaks to the calls to action versus creating an environment that may in the beginning have the effect that we are hoping it does, but in the long run that fades, as we've seen on Remembrance Day, for example. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grandison. Councillor Cardinal.
Thanks, Councillor Grandison. I understand, Remembrance Day we're remembering that, the lost souls that went to war and all that stuff. And, the government had made that a national statutory holiday. I feel that the thousands of residential school kids that were taken away from their families is just as able to have that holiday as well. Who's to say how many people are to have who's to say how anybody celebrates or mourns or has their holiday? It's up to the community to be able to have their holiday anyway. But the fact that us or myself bringing the motion forward, recognizing that there's a special day put aside for the lost souls of children, and that's thousands and thousands and thousands of children, probably going to be tens of thousands of children that were murdered and taken away from their homes. And Orange Shirt Day, is it's a representation of a woman that's from BC. She went to the residential school system, and she had this nice, real shiny shirt that was orange, and she brought it to there, and the residential school took it away from her, and she cried, and she was very upset. But I just wanted to educate where the Orange Shirt Day came from. But I believe that the lost children, deserve this one special day out of each and every year to be able to reflect, mourn, as well as celebrate the not being assimilated. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Cardinal. I just want to remind Council, as everybody's making good points, that today's debate is not whether or not it will be we're not voting on it being it being a holiday, but we're discussing whether to ask administration to go and research what the implications are and bring that back to Council as a report.
Well, they'll listen to all our debate points though, and then go off of that, right?
Yeah, they'll come back with like your motion says, they'll come back with any implications, operational, financial, and otherwise, and then we'll probably go into debate and discuss whether we're going to make it. Then we're going to decide then. Do you have any other debate points or questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. Before we vote, Councilor Cardinal, would you want to read your motion again so everyone's clear on what we're voting on, please?
I move that administration be directed to research and bring forward a report for Council's consideration of recognizing the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th, as a general holiday for municipal employees beginning in 2023. Such report to include any implications, operational, financial, or otherwise.
Thank you, Councilor Cardinal. I'll call for a vote. All in favor? And any opposed? That's one opposed. That's carried with one opposed. And again, thank you, Councilor Cardinal, for bringing that forward. And I will thank Council for all their comments and debate points. And look forward to a report from administration. That closes all business for today. The meeting is now adjourned. We'll move.